I just want to say one thing. It's Alex's first day on holiday today. He's come all the way from Aberdeen to speak to us. With Moira, his lovely wife, who comes from Peebles. So we welcome her back. But we know what an extraordinary year he's had. And to come here on his first day of holiday says something about the man and his commitment to this festival and its ideas and values. So I want to give a big round of applause to Alex Salmond. And just say this, last year, although it was the referendum year, he took time out to launch Beyond Borders and a number of our other initiatives right at the very moment when he was campaigning and during the Commonwealth Games. So I know he's got the international brief now, but he always had it in the past. And I am very, very grateful for all his support for what we do. So Alex Salmond and the wonderful Jim Knockerty, please take the stage.
Thank you very much.
I was just thinking.
He always wants to get in first.
I'll only do that so he can say that.
Yes, I know.
But
first word and last word.
Right, first word and last word. I was going to say that giving me a round of applause for interrupting the first day of my holidays is fine, but it's actually Mrs. Salmond that you should be applauding because.
Because everyone knows you never take a holiday.
Well, I don't do the holidays very much, but I think it could be safe to say I wouldn't be here without Moira's permission. So there you go.
And you're never off duty. Let me just begin by asking you how it looks to come back to the House of Commons after actually quite a few years. I mean, you were there, from 87 through a very interesting period. Then you were away doing other things, which we'll come back to. You're now back there. How does it look to you?
Well, there's some things obviously a great improvement. I was doing a photo call on about the first day back outside St Stephen's entrance, and there was 56 SNP MPs there. And my mind went back to the day that I was unjustly, unfairly discriminated against by being flung out of the House of Commons for making a modest intervention in the middle of the budget speech. And the point was that there was one of me, as it were, and I was surrounded by the Westminster press corps. My mind went back, and it was quite a changed experience. Basically, I suppose I used to run around and look like a crowd, and now we are a crowd. So it's really that side of it's good. The other bit, which perhaps, I suppose we all become, yourself accepted, Jim, old fogies,
Thank you.
In the sense that you do sort of think to yourself, I haven't heard in the Conservative benches anybody that can speak like John Biffin. For example, when I was a young MP, John Biffin, a very elegant, knowledgeable Conservative MP. And frankly, Neil Kinnock on a bad day was better than Ed Miliband on a good day. So you sort of wonder, the SNP 56 apart, of course, and the extraordinarily wonderful Mary Black and people like that. But in terms of the general governmental standard, you begin to when you come back to something, then it's difficult not to come to the conclusion that standards of Westminster governance are slipping.
We'll return to that. You've written a book and you've written another one. This is almost inevitable, and there'll be no doubt another one after that. The Dream Shall Never Die. I've got problems with the grammar there, but never mind. It's a sheer. It's a lift from Teddy Kennedy's convention speech in 1980, isn't it?
Well, I had to say it because I said it when I resigned. So I can hardly say the Dream Shall Never Die as the last statement of my resignation speech and then change it for the title of the book, Jim.
No, I know.
That'd be a bit
absolutely.
daft.
I'm teasing you. But anyway.
So I've managed to get a splinter in my hand with this chair. Is this what you do to unsuspecting people from the northeast of Scotland? You provide chairs with splinters, in which case you might get one in your posterior, Jim.
So much for you. So much for you pretending to be a country boy in Aberdeenshire. Anyway, you're actually, as I was saying to Tam last night, I saw Tam last night, and he said, well, of course, yes. Yeah. And he said, of course, you will remind them that we're both black bitches.
Yes, it's a term of great praise.
It needs to be explained.
It means you're born within the sound of St Michael's bells and the Liverpool. But I have to say, it does confirm everything my political opponents have ever said about me. So I'm definitely a black bitch.
Okay.
And
well,
that's a term
what I want
of
to do,
great praise.
because the book's very interesting, it's a good read, and the next one will be the same. And I want to take you back. Just give us, I know you've got a passage there which takes us back a year, and that gets us into some very interesting stuff. So just read that bit for us.
Yeah, I thought it'd be fun to look back and see what I was doing exactly a year ago today, on Sunday, the 24th of August, 2014. It's amazing, actually, to think it's a year. In the sort of way that politically, actually, a huge amount has happened since. But here's the diary entry for day 74 of the 100 days in the first book, on Sunday the 24th of August. Full-scale debate preparation, and this time I'm looking forward to the showdown, even after getting drenched in the ice bucket challenge. It's probably right that we staged the rehearsal for the debate in the Apex Hotel in Dundee. We chose it for the convenience of those involved in the team, but I've got a warm feeling towards the place, given that our leadership team devised the strategy for winning the 2007 election in this very hotel. And Dundee is shaping up to have the biggest yes vote in the country. There was a key moment in our preparations for 2007 which summed up the change in approach of the SNP. Under Claire Howell's guidance, we were having a leadership bonding session. As part of this exercise, we all had to nominate who we thought was the most positive person in the room. To a person, we all nominated Jim Mather, the party's business spokesperson, and later the Scottish Government's business minister. Jim, however, nominated me. He confided later that he wouldn't have done it previously. You believing we can win doesn't guarantee success, he said to me. But if you don't believe it, then it guarantees failure. I decided there and then that I'd spent too much time in politics behaving like an opposition politician, and too little presenting what the SNP would do in government. It was a mistake I corrected. First, before the debate preparation, we get down to some real business. The Ice Bucket Challenge is proving an internet sensation. Even Alistair Darling tried it at the weekend, though he looked somewhat less uncomfortable. Getting drooped in Dundee offers two advantages. First, a chance to wear my Black Watch polo team outfit. I'd been looking for a use for it since Martin Gilbert sent it to me from South America. Second, I get the opportunity to nominate David Cameron for a soaking, because I know he won't do it, and Nicola Sturgeon, because I know she will.
Yes.
She's there with me, and therefore has no choice. Once we dry out, it's time to prepare for turning up the heat on Darling. Around the table are Nicola, her special advisor, Noel Dolan, Jeff Aberdeen, Kevin Pringle, Stuart Nicholson, Duncan Hamilton, Tasmina Ahmed Sheikh. Duncan, the former MSP and talented advocate, plays Darling as we stage a proper dress rehearsal, complete with podiums and the likely laying out of the Kelvin Grove. Kevin, our lead pressman, who has been with me throughout this political journey, suggests with a dry wit, "Of course, Alec, we all know that you only lost the first debate to win the expectations game for the second one. In terms of press expectations, we are now in a great position." The rehearsal goes well. Tasmina, who has substantial film experience, is first rate with advice on style. We decide to incorporate the best things from the first debate with a distinct change of strategy for the second. Thanks to Angus Roxburgh's work on Friday, I have worked out a crisp line on Europe. However, the most important aims to come out of this rehearsal are to seize the initiative on currency very early to unsettle Alistair, and to nail his defence of the Tories and the health service as being a more general indication of the better together Tory-Labour establishment alliance. On the former, Duncan is brilliant. On the latter, Nicola, very effective. Kevin and Stuart want to pin down Darling on job-creating powers to the Parliament. A simple enough question which they believe he'll be incapable of answering. This is going to play out well, I hope.
Why did you screw up the first debate so badly?
Well, I think actually it was the Ice Bucket Challenge. I think if you get
No, this is
drooped
before
in-
the ice bucket challenge.
No. I'm saying
The
if you
first
get
one.
if you get drooped in ice cold water, then that helps your preparations. So I think the key aspect for the second debate was the ice bucket challenge.
Were you too complacent in the
No,
first one?
no, it's certainly not that. I think a couple of things. One, I got the timing wrong. It was the day after the Commonwealth Games finished, and I'd sort of. I thought, the Commonwealth Games had been at for 7 years. We'd been planning the Commonwealth Games for 7 years. And I thought, once the Games got started, then it'd just be a matter of turning up at a few stadium here and there. And that
You thought nothing could go wrong.
Yeah, well, exactly. Well, actually, you had 10, 11 days of intense, extraordinary things that wouldn't even, you can't believe the things that almost went wrong. And that wasn't the ideal debate preparation, and I should have realised that. And secondly, I was kind of persuaded. It's my responsibility to sort of tone down my natural style, to be less confrontational, more first ministerial. I was told, and I'm not certain it's been some.
But that's not what you did in the first debate.
Oh yeah,
You got quite feisty.
No, I don't. I think
Well,
not
they
that.
have a different
I think
definition
that
of
was
feisty.
that was the much better debate in the BBC, Jim.
Right. Okay.
No, I think you should to your own self be true. I think somebody wrote once.
Well, look, let's want to get back to the present, but this is a very interesting reflection. When you wrote that diary entry about the preparation for the second debate on the 20, whatever it is, of August last year, did you think you were going to win?
Yeah, and I always thought we could win the referendum.
Oh no, I'm not saying could.
No,
Did you think you would?
Yeah, I was coming to that bit. In the previous, of course, as you've read the diary, Jim, as you know, in the previous week, I detected a range of things quickening the pace, as I think I put it, in terms of public reaction. I've always been a very instinctive politician in the sense that I take. There's a passage in the new book, right, which is about the general election campaign.
I knew you'd get onto the new book.
I learned from a master, Jim.
Right, right.
But I talk about, I became convinced that Kintore in my Gordon constituency was Jim will know well, being from the northeast of Scotland, was less than enthusiastic about my candidature. And this was
they couldn't bear you, many.
Well, this was entirely based on a gesture, a rather rude gesture, had been made to my car cavalcade and going through it about the previous Saturday. Now, the reason I say that, it turned out Kintore was absolutely fine. The ballot box samples and all the rest of it was grand. But often, as a candidate, you get just even a single gesture, a single person not looking you in the eye, sure. Or you become to detect a general trend. Now, if you think about it, the referendum was like a huge constituency across the country. So therefore, both things happen. You can tell when people are cool, and you can tell when people are getting interested. And over in the run-up to the second debate, perhaps something to do with the Commonwealth Games and the aftermath of it, I detected a real quickening of the political pace in Scotland.
Did you ever detect a change that led to the real result?
No,
You thought it was there on the morning?
I thought we could.
Did you wake up on the morning thinking you'd win?
Yeah, well, I knew it was going to be a damn close run.
Of course.
Jim,
but did you think you would
win? I thought we could win the referendum. I thought we would win the referendum, and that was based on the momentum.
When did you realise you hadn't?
Oh, when the first result was declared in Clackmannan. The reason Clackmannan, the wee county, is actually politically a microcosm of Scotland. It votes very close to Scotland. So
and it came as a surprise.
Certainly, I've had better moments. Yes.
No, I know it was a horrible moment for you, but did you not expect it?
I thought we'd be just ahead in Clackmannan. So it was 54-46 against, and that
which turned out to be, and then Fife, which always votes as Scotland votes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. When the Fife result came, it was exactly 55-45, wasn't it?
So, I mean, once Clackmannan declared then I thought the game was up. That's when I wrote the concession speech.
And did you think, as you went into the general election campaign, in which you were a candidate, obviously, that you would get the kind of tsunami that developed, 56 out of 59.
You've got a wasp in your glass of wine, Jim.
No, it's fine.
I merely mention this because I would hate to see my...
It's been moving from yours to... I've
No,
been
no,
monitoring it for the last few minutes while you were reading.
I brushed it across to yours. Sorry,
Right,
you were talking about tsunamis.
Okay. Yes, I was. There was a tsunami in May, as we all know.
Yeah. And
When did you know that it was going to be of that proportion?
On
why?
On the morning of the election, Moira always asked me to write down what's going to happen, because she, for all these years, and she's still of the belief that I know what's going on, which is the most amazing
Dear,
thing.
oh dear, Moira, honestly.
So on at breakfast on the day of the referendum, I wrote down 51.
What did you write down on the morning of the referendum?
Well, she asked me, and then I thought.
What did you
I
say?
thought
Come
we-
on.
I
You've raised the subject.
thought we could just do it, and that's what I said. I thought we could just do it, and I believed that, so absolutely. And she asked me after the Clackmannan result, and I said, "Well, it's just the." It's just the first result, darling. But I went upstairs and wrote a concession speech at that stage.
So you knew at that point you would resign. Sorry to go back to this.
No,
but
I wrote a concession. I wrote a concession speech for the which I delivered for the.
But when did
for
you
the campaign.
decide to do what you did the next day?
Oh, when Cameron waltzed out of Downing Street, and instead, I mean, if you picture this moment, I was just off the phone to him. I phoned to congratulate him through gritted teeth, I have to admit, but nonetheless,
was it a pleasant conversation?
It's the right thing to do. I've had better conversations in my life.
Was he generous?
This was the interesting thing. I mean, I phoned to congratulate him, and said, well done, and all the rest of it. And he said, "Oh yes, you've had a brilliant campaign." I said, "Yeah, but you."
That's what he said. He used the word brilliant.
Yes, he did. And I said, "Well, but you won." And then, he said to me, "Oh yes, I've appointed Lord Smith to take forward the devolution proposals." And so I said to him, "Great choice." And there was this kind of silence at that end of the phone, and I knew he was trying to work out why I thought that Lord Smith was a good choice.
Which is why you'd said it.
Which is why I said it. But I was thinking, doesn't he realise that I appointed Robert Smith to lead the Commonwealth Games? Does he think I'd appoint some numpty to lead the most important sporting event in Scotland's history? So he obviously didn't know that Robert's a friend of mine, has been for many. Incidentally, a diehard unionist friend of mine, but nonetheless a friend of mine, and has been for many years, and I thought he was an excellent choice. But I could tell in that moment, you could tell that he was suspicious of why I said good choice. And then there was the key moment, Jim. What he did was, look, in these situations, what does a statesperson do? A statesperson goes out to Downing Street and says something like, "Look, this has been a close run thing. A week ago, myself and the other party leaders at Westminster believed we were going to lose the Union. And so we went up to Scotland, suspended Prime Minister's questions, and I can absolutely promise you, I can absolutely commit that before Christmas we shall deliver in word, in deed, in principle, every single promise we've made in the vow. And that is our absolute priority, to honour our commitment to the people of Scotland." Now, instead of that, he waltzed out of Downing Street and said, "Well, that's Scotland finished. Let's talk about English votes for English laws." And he did that because he had, he wasn't actually in the shot, but if you can imagine a shot, he had Nigel Farage on his shoulder, and he's sort of looking over, wondering, how this is going to play.
Well,
now, I believe that was a key moment in subsequent developments.
Right.
And unusually, of course, it's probably the only thing in recent years I've agreed with Gordon Brown about. Gordon Brown also believes that was a key moment in subsequent
No, I think most people who've looked at it do. But, statesmen, you used the word statesman-like moments. People lose it a wee bit, don't they? I remember in the week before the referendum, after 3,000 or 4,000 people gathered outside the BBC, saying that everybody who worked for the BBC was a traitor because Nick Robinson had asked you a question you didn't like. And they had pictures of Nick on posters saying this man should be sacked, and when we take over the BBC it will all be over. When you were asked about it the next day, you said, no, it was a joyous moment. It wasn't joyous, it was horrible.
Well, here we're going to have a disagreement, another BBC disagreement.
Yeah.
I've heard Nick describe this as a government orchestrated demonstration.
No, I didn't say that.
I know you didn't, but since you raised Nick,
Yes.
that's how he described it. As akin, as he put it the other day, to Putin's Russia. Well, firstly, it had nothing to do with the government. And in saying that, of course, what Nick does, and not you, Jim, but he betrays his total lack of understanding about the process that was going on in Scotland. What was going on was a grassroots uprising.
Nicola said the following day that she deprecated
Well,
it.
then Nicola chooses her own words. What you have in the referendum campaign is a grassroots uprising of people responding as they see it to developments and events. To have a peaceful demonstration outside the public service broadcaster, who for the purposes of the referendum, Jim, had turned into a state broadcaster, which is an entirely different thing, is an entirely legitimate process. Now, in particular, since we're on to the subject, what I objected to about Nick and the BBC's role in this is this was after the Royal Bank decision was leaked by a Treasury official to the BBC at 10:15 the previous evening, 25 minutes before a Royal Bank board meeting finished, which was making that decision. 25 minutes before. And this was presented as the Royal Bank of Scotland leaving Scotland, which was no such thing. Incidentally, the Royal Bank decision, the board decision
Yes.
the previous evening, just let me
Yeah,
finish.
okay, I'll let
You
you finish
raised
the
it,
point.
you're a BBC employee.
No, sure,
Jim.
I'm reading the point.
So I'm going to have this out. 25 minutes before the Royal Bank board meeting decision, a Treasury official leaked to the BBC, which was then misreported in the 10 o'clock news, and Nick Robinson went in to ask the questions, as he's entitled to do, incidentally, the next day at a press conference. Nick asked questions about the Royal Bank of Scotland. Any journalist on the planet would have asked Nick.
Yeah.
According to Nick now, that wasn't what he was talking about. He said he was talking about credibility of business or something. The questions were answered comprehensively, in full, to the nth degree. And yet his production for the 1 o'clock news claimed I hadn't answered his questions. Now, his problem was that this was live streamed on the internet. And any person who looked at the live stream could see the sequence of questions and answers and judge for themselves. Now, I know that Nick now says he misplayed his words and all the rest of it. But we're in a different age now, Jim. And we're no longer in an age where people have to receive information. We're no longer where people are just recipients. People are now participants in the political and
that's
information
absolutely
process.
true.
And at some point, the BBC are going to have to recognise that, because
No.
I believe their role, the organisation which you've worked with great distinction for so many years in the referendum campaign, was an absolute and utter disgrace.
Well, I
And a
disagree.
travesty.
I disagree with that, but we're not here to talk about the BBC. I mean, I think that...
Well, you raised it, Jim.
Well, no. I know. I raised a very simple thing. I raised the question of these demos and so on, because it seems to me that when you raised the question of statesmanship on Cameron's part, it strikes me that on the other side of the coin, there is a moment when you have to rise above the fray.
No.
There is.
I believe in the Churchill quote, in defeat, resolution, in victory, magnanimity. When you're the victor in a referendum, that's when you're meant to be magnanimous. That was the test
Which you
that
think he
Cameron
failed.
Of course he did.
Well, look, let's... there's a lot of other stuff to talk about. The general election, and I know you've got a little passage from your general election diary.
What about the borders?
Well, why don't you do it now, and then we'll move on to that.
I chose this one because it ends up about the borders, and it'll be something that everybody in this audience will recognise about communications in the borders. First thing to East Kilbride for a book signing in Waterstones. All of these events have been well attended, but this one is foot of the gunnels. I've made it a rule to sign every book before leaving. As a result, I end up hours late by the time I get to Hamilton for an endorsement photo with the local candidates. A huge campaign team had waited patiently for my arrival with spirits undimmed, as had Radio 5 Live, with whom I conducted...
BBC?
Yes, one of the easier interviews of my career. I had just
on the BBC.
I had just received.
So it wasn't a disgrace on that occasion.
I had
was it?
just
That's
received news of the STV Murray poll showing the SNP on an extraordinary 54%. And social media is alive with reports of Jim Murphy being interviewed about the poll while doing the hokey cokey with a group of pensioners.
Slowly.
In that context, being asked provocative questions about what Nigel Farage says about the SNP is neither here nor there. John Pienaar is seriously impressed about what he is finding in Scotland and is beginning to believe that an SNP clean sweep is possible. It isn't, of course, but we could get close to it if we can take the free borders seats. Much earlier this year, I'd held meetings in Dumfries and Kelso in front of huge audiences, and I actually believe that anything is possible. The Labour seat of Dumfries is well within our compass. However, the seats of lone Tory David Mundell and the Liberal Michael Moore will be tough nuts to crack. We had decided to have a major fundraiser in the North East to help secure victory in Moore's Berwickshire seat. Thus, we invited Berwickshire to join a hugely successful auction we had held jointly with North East Fife, Livingston and Oakland South Perthshire. The injection of substantial funds to a constituency that had seldom before had any serious money is proving important in competing with the headquartered funded operations of the Liberals and Tories. I head off for a street meeting in Gala and a town hall meeting in Hoyk, which goes with a bang. Callum Kerr has developed enormously since his adoption meeting in Kelso in February and turns in a totally assured and confident performance. After careful reflection, I add Berwickshire to my list of flutters in this campaign. It is about the last seat in Scotland where you can get decent odds against an SNP victory. I demand of Callum that when he's elected, he conducts an immediate campaign to secure better internet connectivity in the borders. Why are you asking, he says? So that next time I'm travelling in the borders, I can watch Jim Murphy doing the hokey cokey
Right.
on my iPad.
Right.
I apply.
We know what happened in the election. Interesting that you, John Pienaar is obviously not going to have a demonstration against him outside the BBC.
A first-class guy.
That right. Let's talk about the election and what happened afterwards. I want to introduce the name of Jeremy Corbyn to you, because you're in Westminster now, you're watching it. First of all, why do you think it's come about?
Well, there's two reasons. One is an immediate reason, and I won't go into
No,
short effort,
sorry.
but we just had a reading. So there's Monday the 20th of July is a day that sums this up. That's the day that the Labour opposition decided to abstain on the welfare bill.
And Andy Burnham went along with it.
And Andy Burnham went along with it and then said, listen, if I was leader, we wouldn't have abstained, etc. Now, that was the day that the establishment of the Labour Party died as an opposition, and that's what put the petrol into Jeremy's engine. That day, more than anything else, because it symbolised the Labour establishment out of touch, and therefore their attacks on him. There's something much more important that's going on, out with the confines of the Labour Party. And that is that there is a distrust, a huge distrust now, on the, what should we call it, the neoliberal consensus, the argument that it is inevitable that in response to economic crisis that there has to be austerity programs and that the poor and vulnerable and weaker members of the community will bear the brunt of that austerity. There is a questioning of that, which is being reflected different ways in different countries, but it's a broad questioning. And really for the first time since the Second World War in the Western world, there is a challenge to political and economic orthodoxy. And Jeremy, who, incidentally, I mean, in the book I point out that while people were sort of saying his challenge was ridiculous and nonsensical and he would get nowhere, I would say, no, look, this is a serious person and a serious politician. However, the interesting thing is that Jeremy has made infinitely more speeches about international affairs, of course, than he has about the economy and domestic affairs. But nonetheless, in the Labour leadership election, he has come to symbolise that deep distrust of establishment orthodox thinking. Well, and it's a more general than just the failings of the previous Labour leadership.
Isn't it fair to say that, apart from the point you've just made eloquently, that there's a broader point, which is a mistrust of established political authority in general, not simply the Labour Party on the question of austerity.
Yes, I agree with that. Yeah.
And that for example, the explosion in social media and so on has helped to fuel that. And without being too grand and broad about it, if you look at what's happened in various countries in Europe, and indeed if you look what's happened in the United States, especially on the right, but on the left as well, particularly with Trump and so on, that you've got this kind of wild kind of, anything goes feeling. And in those circumstances, when somebody says, well, Corbyn's ideas don't add up in tax terms, they say, well, that doesn't actually matter. We don't care. We just want to go for broke.
Well, there's something fair in that, but there also is an argument that depends how you do the sums. You take for example the most recent thing in the Observer today, the suggestion that you would take into account excess profits or undervalued assets if taking something back into public ownership which had been sold improperly. Now, and take a recent example, rather than speculate on the future. Let's take the Royal Mail.
Yes.
I think there's a perfectly valid, substantial political argument that if something is manifestly sold under its value, then there is a very reasonable argument for saying that you wouldn't pay full cost price if a decision was made to take it back to the public.
Do you think there'll be legal problems there?
Oh, I dare say there would be legal problems. My surprise is there's not legal problems with selling it under value in the first place. That's what I would have thought.
Well, yeah, okay.
But I'm not making the point because you can necessarily argue that as a policy. I'm just saying that the comfortable assumption of saying that is a policy that's wild is something that needs to be challenged. So I think it's wild, Jim. I think it's extremely wild to say, right, what we should do in a period of austerity is take the people with the lowest incomes and say you shall lose the largest percentage of your low incomes.
Yeah,
I think that's wild.
No, absolutely. It's a perfectly fair political point to make. The question is, what do you think that the intervention of the sort of Corbynistas and his, it appears, likely win, is going to do to the system?
Yeah, well, just as I had a flutter on the border seat. Yeah, I do, absolutely. Yes. But I only ever back horses and politics, because it's the only two things I know anything about. But I had a wee flutter at Jeremy Corbyn. Unfortunately, not at 100 to 1, unfortunately. When? But about 3 weeks ago, but he was still odds against.
Well, that's very late.
Very late. Yeah, well, I didn't think he was going to win. I didn't think he was going to win before that. Right. I mean, that's,
what odds did you get as a matter of interest?
About 6 to 4, 13 to 8. So
that's fairly.
Well, it certainly looks good now, as it were. But can I? Jeremy,
I want to ask how much.
Jeremy Corbyn's.
Well, I will ask how much.
Well, you can ask, but I'm not telling you.
Right, okay,
that's fine.
Okay, right.
Well, I mean, I would tell you if Moira wasn't here.
Yeah, well, exactly. We all have that question. Right.
But Jeremy's difficulties, right?
So it's big.
Jeremy's difficulties are going to be in terms of the structures of the Labour Party. I mean, if you're elected under these circumstances and you're facing the onslaught of the establishment media, which you will, then that's one thing. But if you're also facing an internal issue, then it's very difficult for anybody to fight front and back. And he's going to have, if he becomes leader, he's going to have enormous difficulties. I also think that the Labour right wing are among the most treacherous people I've ever seen in politics. Incidentally, I think they make the Labour left wing look like patsies in comparison.
But if if it was floated the other day that he might say he didn't want to take the Privy Council oath because he doesn't sort of think it makes any sense. You took it, obviously.
Absolutely.
And anybody who's been leader of the Labour Party since the party was formed has taken it. There would be moments at which the Prime Minister could say there are things I can't say to you because you're not.
Well, I'll tell you
what do you think would happen if he said no?
You're quite right. In 2007, I took the Privy Council off, and I'll tell you why. Because I think there are issues in politics you should fight about, and there are issues which you shouldn't fight about. But the Prime Minister hasn't divulged a decent secret to me since 2007, despite the fact I've taken the Privy Council off. And, but I still...
Well, he hasn't started a war lately.
Well, he has been involved in one or two, Jim.
Yeah, okay, yes.
Was that Libyan escapade?
Yes,
things
yeah,
like that.
right.
How did that one turn out, Jim? But the
Don't ask me to answer for the government.
You're the one that said there hadn't been a war, Jim.
It's terribly nice to be asked to respond on behalf of a Conservative government. It's unusual. Anyway, carry on. Carry on.
No, but I mean, what if he did? That has never been an accusation that's been levelled against you.
Precisely.
The contrary one has been levelled
exactly,
against
and
you.
it's
and you've been known to call Conservative ministers things that I would never call any.
This is what is known as a diversionary tactic. No, the point.
Question?
There's a serious point here. If Corbyn became leader, and if he said, "Look, I'm not going to play by the rules because I believe that's why I was elected."
Yeah.
That there is a kind of tsunami, to use our old word, about the general election and to some extent the referendum. There's a support that's saying, let's do things differently. And I intend to do that. Do you think he could survive?
I think Jeremy will be undone because he's fighting front and back. I don't think, incidentally, not playing by the rules is a bad idea. I think, in that situation, the situation he'll be in, the situation that I was in a year ago, I think in the old phrase, if you always play the game, you'll always lose, because the rules are not set to help insurgent
But you have
forces.
to choose your moment.
But you have to choose your moments, and for me, taking the loyal oath is not a moment to choose. There are other bigger issues, I would say. Mind you, I had a great friend who was my solicitor once, Peter Sheen, who had tragically died a number of years ago in a climbing accident. But Peter was from a very established, well-respected, I'd have to say the establishment legal family in Edinburgh. And Peter was the kind of radical side of the family. He did a magazine called 7 Days, I remember, way back. Yeah. Anyway, Peter became the first notary public in Scotland to refuse to swear the loyal oath. And he went to the Court of Session and won the right to become a notary public without taking the loyal oath in a kind of groundbreaking case. But for Peter, that was a point of principle. Perhaps It is for Jeremy Corbyn. For me, you should choose your moments at which to make your point.
We want to open it up to questions in a moment. Referendums.
Great idea.
Leave aside the question of the European referendum for a moment. Well, assume that it's a yes vote for the sake of this argument, just for the sake of this argument. Is there any other circumstance in which over the next, shall we say, 5 years, you think that a second referendum is likely?
Well, Nicola described the situation in the election as the change in material circumstance. Right. And she cited, as you rightly say, the European issue as providing...
Is there anything else that would give the excuse?
Well, I think, obviously when this book, the next book's out in 2 weeks' time, Jim, you'll be able to... I deal with this matter, so I don't want to give too much away, Jim.
For goodness sake, come on. Out with it.
But I think, I've always believed that the likely timescale for a referendum is what I've described as a political generation. And I've always used the template of the referendum in 1979 in devolution, and then in 1997, 18 years later, a political generation, there was a second referendum. But of course, there are circumstances which can change that, the material changes. And I've been surprised by the almost casual way that the Conservative government is almost provoking these changes. The two other issues which I think compress that timescale as follows. One, and I would defy anybody to say different. I almost phoned the editor of Daily Record a week or so ago.
A Corbyn supporter.
And good luck to the Record to establish their independence by supporting Jeremy Corbyn as opposed to by supporting independence is an interesting editorial choice. But the reason I was phoned because they almost casually in editorial said that the vow had been delivered. Now, of course, they perhaps have to say that because the vow, of course, was
on the front page
the record construction in the medieval. I mean, no one, any reasonable estimation, can legitimately say that the vow has been delivered.
But is that what bothers people, do you think?
Well, I think it does bother people for reasons I'll come on to in a second. But the vow was for Home Rule, near federalism,
Yeah.
devo to the max, to quote the Daily Record. There's no way that...
So that's the record.
What is, yeah, but
Yeah,
okay,
but-
devo to the
yes.
max, but Home Rule was everybody.
Sure.
And near federalism was Gordon Brown, who
Yes.
was presented as the voice of credibility to present the vow. And there's no way that what's on offer thus far matches anywhere close to that commitment. Now, don't give me the next point.
Okay.
Now. The next thing is the extent of the... Well, it's not devo to the max we're getting. It's austerity to the max. And the extent of the political assault in terms of the welfare proposals goes beyond anything that I think
So
even
you think that's
members of the
material?
Conservative-
That's a material change of the kind that
no,
Nicola Sturgeon mentioned. do you?
What I'm saying was she identified the European issue as a material
Yes.
change. I think these two issues are suggesting that the timescale is going to be somewhat more compressed than I believe.
Do you think it's more likely than not?
That's David
Let's-
Cameron.
I was going to say, there's somebody listening through an
See if
iPhone.
you've said anything rude
Do you
about
think it is more likely than not that there will be a second referendum before the general election of 2020?
Oh, I mean, you put me in a position where I have to say...
You're not usually shy about answering
No, I'm
questions.
not. You see, and when I was leader of the SNP and leader of the Independence
Oh,
Referendum
stop
Yes
getting off the
campaign,
point. Do you think it's
you
more
can tell
or
me to
less
do
likely?
anything. Now I've got the enormous ability to look this audience and you straight in the eye and say, this is a matter for Nicola Sturgeon and the people of Scotland.
Well, that's an interesting wee observation. I
you were
just
saying
look. We've got
dodge.
10 minutes to go. Let's open it up to questions. There's one there. The mics will come. Just keep the hands coming up. Keep them brief. No political speeches. Just questions. Thanks.
So one of the most interesting things I think about the referendum was that you were talking to 5 million people and Cameron, Clegg and Miliband were talking to 60 million people. They had a different constituency they had to talk to. And I just wondered how far you thought it was important that in Scotland the political parties established a complete level of independence from the British parties, and also whether you think the fact that there's an equal number of constituency MPs at Westminster for the SNP that as at Holyrood, whether you might face some similar problems of constituency issues.
Right, I mean, both questions are very interesting. If I had been a candidate for leadership of the Labour Party in Scotland over the last few months, which I wasn't obviously, but if I had been a candidate,
Give us a speech.
then I would have certainly stood on a platform of having an independent Labour Party. I noted I think it was in the National recently that they showed James Connolly's membership card of the Labour Party was auctioned in Dublin recently. James Connolly, the Irish revolutionary. In 1894, I think it was, and his membership card was auctioned, right? And it was a membership card for the Scottish Labour Party.
Mm.
Not for the Independent Labour Party
Yeah.
or the Labour Party Coordinating Committee. It was a membership of the Scottish Labour Party in 1894. And the two figures on his wonderful, beautifully inscribed membership cards, you get a kind of credit card
Yes,
now, but
yeah.
these are beautiful things, works of art. One was Keir Hardie, later founder of the Independent Labour Party and then the Labour Party. And the second one was Robert Cunningham Graham, much later founder of the Scottish National Party. These were the two figures on that membership card. But the point about it was a membership card for the Scottish Labour
you think
Party.
that
If I'd been a candidate, I would have stood under that platform. And the answer to your second question is, the great advantage the SNP has, and of course, it's not an advantage that insulates you from any of the normal pitfalls or difficulties of politics or rivalries or all the nonsense that goes on in any organisation, incidentally, but political organisations perhaps more so. But the core belief, the principle, the aim of Scottish independence, parties which have a principled aim tend on the whole to be more cohesive because everybody's in it for that principal aim. Parties which lose that aim, which it might be argued the Labour Party has for some considerable time, or parties, for that matter, which are really interested in just the pursuit of power, which could be argued the Conservative Party is an excellent organisation in terms of representing that principle, I think are more liable to these jealousies and rivalries. So I would have thought the SNP would have been held together by the the principal pursuit of Scottish independence, which is a great advantage to have.
Well, the extraordinary thing about the Tory party is that although there is a deep, deep division about Europe and on some big social issues in Cameron's party, of course it's held together. It's party of government. It's not done too badly.
No, but the Tory party, it has been argued, is an organisation which exists to have the pursuit of government,
yes.
As opposed to have any great principle. I mean, even Tory philosophers argue that position. Yeah. I don't know, for Jim, if you look at if one difficulty is with the smoke of the Labour leadership, it's difficult. But there have been 4 votes in the House of Commons already.
This is very important. I agree with you
which the government either retreated from, or were about to lose, or in one case where the Labour Party could have joined with other opposition parties and
but this is why Corbyn might let them off the hook.
In what? In the sense of having a leadership contest?
Well, in the sense that the Labour Party becomes an internal battle.
Yeah, well, I mean...
And the government can get on with it.
I think the only problem with that is that if I were Jeremy Corbyn, I'd point to the welfare vote and say what happened then. Or if I were not Jeremy Corbyn, I would point to the vote on... I mean, I know it doesn't sound like a huge issue, but this issue of having a purdah period in a referendum, when the government would have been defeated on that. They would have been defeated, but the Labour abstained, which was an extraordinary thing. Why wouldn't you want to defeat the government on something like that?
Maybe the answer is
he has an argument that way.
Anyway, okay, let's get another question. Here and then there. Right.
Hello, Alex. I'm wondering why the SNP's stance on not having an EU referendum at all, when we had a Scottish referendum for the rest of the UK. Sure, is it not fair to open up that debate, no matter what side you're on the EU question?
Right.
Well, I suppose that the answer would be that we stood in the election on a platform and not having an EU referendum. That was our platform. That was clearly our argument. We didn't think it was a useful, meaningful debate. We didn't think there was a reservoir of opinion in Scotland which wanted to leave the European Union. People, if they wished one, could vote for any of the parties which were the Conservatives or UKIP who were promoting a European referendum. So, that was our platform in the election, which turned out into a pretty reasonably satisfactory result. Now, the Labour Party stood against the referendum in the election, and then after the election said, we've changed our mind. The only difficulty with that position is, how many other things? If you change your mind on every issue you get beat on in an election, what's left of your political programme?
Like GM crops, but we won't go there.
Well, we go GM crops if you like. But so we stood on a platform. Now, it's quite legitimate, of course, to believe in a European referendum. But if you stand in an election and say, look, we don't think this is a good thing for the reasons that follow, and we win the election, then you'd expect us to stick to our guns.
I understand.
The question is, isn't it fair for the rest of the UK to have a vote?
Right, okay, well then, of course, Nicola Sturgeon put forward what I thought was an excellent proposal, the so-called quadlock, that if there is to be a referendum, and of course, as we were told last year...
That's a building block for the federal
The
Britain,
United Kingdom is an equal partnership of 4 nations, that's what we were told last year. Then if you're to have a referendum, then it should be done under the rules that all 4 nations must agree to leave the European Union.
And what she's doing there is putting in place the building blocks for a federal
And of course,
Britain,
if the government had, but if the government had accepted that proposition, then we'd have a different issue.
Okay, right, up here. Let's try and get in 2 or 3 more if we're quick.
Take 3 at a time, Joe.
Right, okay, let's do 2 or 3 at a time. If you're quick.
This is a light-hearted question, Alex.
Oh.
And
right, make it a quick one.
hello?
We can hear you, yeah.
You mentioned earlier 25 years being the leader of a party in opposition. And during that period, I had the impression that you didn't actually want independence, but you were using it as a rallying cry to gather the troops. Was that true or not?
Okay.
And if so, when did you change your mind?
Okay, he won't answer that last bit, I'm sure. But anyway, let's get 2 more just to put in the pot. Here, make them quick and snappy, right?
Thanks. Back to Westminster. I'd like to know how you feel that the party is being as an opposition party in
fine.
Westminster.
And then here?
What hope now for decommissioning Trident?
Right, okay. Opposition party was the second one. The first one was,
Well, the first one
did
was-
you enjoy oppositionism for its own sake? And if so,
No.
when did you change
No,
your mind?
I always believed in independence. Take my word for it. The argument in SNP was not about whether you should believe in independence. The argument which dominated the SNP for many years was so-called gradualism against fundamentalism. The idea which I promoted all the time that
And you were
should.
expelled from your own party for doing it.
Well, they had other reasons for expelling me as well, but that
Yes.
was one of them certainly.
You're the only party
Well,
leader I've known who's ever been expelled from his own party
I-
and come back.
No, that's not true. Harold Macmillan, he lost the
Was
Tory
he
whip. Lost the Tory whip.
Oh, but that's not the same as being expelled
Well,
from the
it's
party.
pretty bad. Anyway, Harold Macmillan once said that
You're retreating on this point.
he
but
once
anyway.
said he had substantially less problems with the Conservative Party after he became the leader.
Yes.
I have to say I had substantially less problems with the SNP after I became the
Okay,
leader. It was the
right.
same sort of thing. But I always believed in independence. I just believed that it was legitimate to pursue the cause of independence through the medium of a devolved parliament acquiring powers and moving on.
Right.
I
Second
think that
question about
position been
opposition.
vindicated. Listen, the 50, I know they're my colleagues, so obviously I'm not an unbiased observer. I think this group of 56 is probably the most talented political group I've ever seen. I think it's an extraordinary. And you know, I mean, obviously, Mary's, had 12 million viewers of her maiden speech, and it was an amazing maiden speech. She gave it to me the week before to ask for my advice. I didn't change a single word. It was absolutely stunning. But I mean, the other speech, Philippa Whitford's speech, Tommy Shepherd's speech, these were considerable parliamentary performances.
And it's fair to say also that they've been noticed at Westminster. I mean,
Yeah,
this is not something that...
There has been a total shift in attitude, as you
Yeah.
can imagine, because you were among
Yeah,
them, not
yeah.
with them, but
No,
among
no,
them,
no.
Jim, for a number of years. There's a kind of Westminster gang of press who had a very, very, as it were, hostile or even patronising attitude in the first week.
Well,
But-
sceptical, let's call it sceptical.
Okay,
Right,
sceptical.
okay.
But now that is totally shifted.
I think that's right.
It's really quite interesting. And have manufactured a number of political opportunities to defeat the government, which is one of the roles of opposition. It's
what
not
you do.
the only role of opposition, but it's one of those. And the third
Trident.
question, Trident. Well, I think there is a good chance of stopping the renewal of Trident, or at least postponing.
You think there's a let me just interrupt before you go off on this, because it's very interesting. Do you think there's a middle way that is somewhere between those who believe that the nuclear deterrent should be retained and those who want Trident itself to be removed? Because I don't know I won't presume to know what the questioner thought, but there are a lot of people who want nuclear weapons, the nuclear deterrent from Britain to be removed. There are others who say you can retain a nuclear capacity. Well, no, exactly. But I mean, this is the point. What I'm asking him is it an absolute, as you say, or is there something that's in the wings?
Yeah, I think to be fair to Jimmy, he's not necessarily advocating the.
I'm not
middle way.
advocating anything.
I mean, I'm against nuclear weapons. I think Trident's absurd, but I'm against nuclear weapons. But of course,
there are people who think Trident's absurd who are for nuclear
yes,
weapons.
that's the point is tempting out. I mean, obviously, from a Scottish perspective, it would be nonsensical for a country of 5.25 million people to possess nuclear weapons. It would be totally ridiculous. I think if you get to a situation where the Labour Party is, let's say Jeremy Corbyn wins, is against, the SNP is against, the Greens against, Plaid Cymru is against.
It's
Sorry?
interesting. The PLP wouldn't be against.
Well, I mean,
This is an interesting question,
I
isn't
think on this, I mean, very difficult. I think Jeremy Corbyn's going to have a lot of problems with the PLP.
Yeah.
But I'm not certain that the newer Trident is going to be be one of them.
The biggest one.
I mean, there were people in the past, and like George Robertson or Lord Robertson of NATO, as I used to call him, that would have gone to the last ditch for a renewal of Trident. But I'm not sure how many Atlantists there are in Labour's ranks now. So I just think it's very difficult. If you think about this, the Westminster government is going to have to take a decision to commit £100 billion over the next generation to a nuclear system which they want to locate in Scotland, where right now 57, perhaps even 58 of the MPs from Scotland are against that decision, where the Scottish constitutional question is at best open.
You mean including money in that?
For the future. That would seem to be an extraordinary, difficult decision for them to commit. Now, I know that for some reasons best known to himself, my old friend Corbyn Jones has invited Trident to Wales, which I think was one of the most ridiculous offers that I've ever seen. Well, we can argue about jobs and Trident in a second, but I can think of 100 ways, maybe even 1,000 ways to spend £100 billion, which will generate a lot more jobs than buying Vanguard-class submarines. But so I just think that's a big decision for a government to commit to. Given that one of the things that the defence...
what you're saying is you think it's up for grabs?
I think it's up for grabs. So the answer, I think, was to the lady's question, is that I think we've got but to use an absurd word under the context, a fighting chance of no having Trident. And certainly that will be my view, and I'll pursue it.
Look, we're out of time. I'm just going to... Hang on. I just want to ask one other question. And you would grace the proceedings if you gave a brief answer.
God, I think you were going to invite me to the House of Lords for a minute.
I
was going to say, I was going to grace the proceedings
of the
House of Lords.
Oh, God. Do you think you will live to see what you could legitimately describe as Scottish independence?
Yes.
Thank you for a short thing. Alec will be signing a copy of this book, and he'll be inviting you to the signing of the second and no doubt the third book in the series, In the Tent. Let me just say that your questions were terrific and on the button, and to ask you to join me in thanking the former First Minister and the MP for Gordon for a typically feisty but fascinating conversation. For me, it's been a privilege as ever to have a conversation, and I hope for you it's been an enjoyable afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.